Hi there, Brian again from Pure Pyrex. So, a few videos back I did a little study on the development of how color came into the Pyrex manufacturing in England at the JAJ plant in Sunderland. So this time I thought I'd do a little bit of a study on all the different logos that have been used throughout the years in England. So I'm going to start off with one of the earliest ones, and this is pre-JAJ, and I have a little example of it here. Now, I know I can't show the actual stampings on these on the video very well, so what I've done is I've done photographs and I put them up on the screen here. So this stamping here is Jobling Purser, and this was the company pre-1920s, before James A. Jobling took over the company, and it was called that, and it started being stamped as JAJ. So just to show you that, and they were all clear glass back then. I have this little tart dish here with that stamp on it. So I have to move up here. We move up. Oh, what's happened? Okay. Technical difficulty. Anyway, so the beginnings of the crown logos that typify the J.A. Jobling stampings started kind of with this guy here called King Pyrex, and he was only sort of a short-lived mascot that they used in their advertising, kind of in the mid-50s. So he kind of came and went pretty quick. You saw him in a few ads and then didn't really see much of him again. And I find it funny that he didn't wear a crown, he wore a top hat. So just a funny little note there. So after that, before the color glass came in, this was a typical stamp that you would have saw on all the white glass, because they didn't, as you know, they didn't bring the color glass in until the mid-50s. But they carried this stamping in through to the early sprayware, which, and this is an example of it here, where it's clear glass and it's stamped with the crown with Pyrex below it. And oftentimes they'd be, when you look at the bottom of it, it'd be in a mirror image as well, like this one is, so you can see it through the top into it. But then a lot of the white glass as well that use this stamp in the early days, some of it would be in the ordinary print like this at the bottom, and then also some of them would be mirror image as well, which is kind of strange. Anyway, at the same time, we also had another stamping, which looks like this, which is just the crown. And this would have been on a lot of the tableware and the Weardale, like this dish here, is just the crown on it. It doesn't say Pyrex. So these would have coincided with each other throughout the early days in the 50s. Okay, so they also, shortly after that, started developing stamping for the other dishes. Okay, so the Pyrex tableware stamp was developed, dedicated just for the dishes during that same period. Shortly after that, only a few years differentiates all these stampings, by the way, so this is a very short period of time. And I have two different stamps, so you can split this Pyrex tableware thing into two stamps as well. And that's the earlier one, where the text is slightly smaller and it's deeper, thicker stamping. And I have the second one here, which looks like this, where they're a little bit bigger. I know you can't tell the difference because you need the two side by side, but the text here is larger and it's finer. It's not as thick. So anyway, those two coincide with each other. I'm not exactly sure exactly when they changed from one to the other, but I'm pretty sure the thicker, smaller print was the first one. Okay, so, and keep in mind, I'm not, there's very little documentation about all this stuff, so I'm just kind of using my own judgment to put this stuff together. I'm in no means an expert on any of this, but I'm just trying to be logical about it. So, we also saw the beginnings of Made in England putting on the stampings come in the same period, right? And I have two versions of that as well. And the interesting thing is, so I have these two dishes here, both in the gooseberry style. One would have this stamp on it, which is Made in England over the crown. And then there's another version that has the Pyrex underneath it. So you have the Made in England without. So what? And these dishes are a good example of that. One has one and one doesn't have one. Okay, so there's two different styles there. Now, an interesting thing I want to show before I moved on is this Coronet Jockey cap bowl that I have here has this unusual stamping on it. That's the first mention of jobbling. So far we haven't seen JAJ yet. We've only seen the crown and England. So this one says jobbling, made in England on it, opalware. And other glass companies had dishes they called opalware as well. It just kind of refers to colored glass, you know, has colors on it. And interestingly, I have other Coronet Jockey cap bowls that have that other tableware stamping on them. But this one has this one that says jobbling opalware, made in England. And I think it's probably to do with commercial applications, like in restaurants or hotels, something like that. They probably had a range that was for that. So, but if anyone knows anything different about that, I'd be interested. Send me that in the comments or something. So, oh, and I have these two here are examples of the tableware that I showed previously, where this one is a tableware stamping, but this one has the later JAJ stamping on it. So it shows you how the ranges, the same styles of dishes and the same patterns can cover a wide range, and the stampings can change over time. And that happens more than once. It's just that the snowflake one's a good example because it ranges about 10 years or so. Anyway, so we'll move on. Now we're moving on from the early stuff. All the stampings I've showed you now are like examples of the early JAJ from the mid-50s right up through to the early 60s. And then now we're going to come up and you'll see the first introduction of the JAJ Made in England stamp. And now there are two versions of that. This is the earlier version, and it's ever so slightly, you'd have to, I've seen so many of them that I can tell the difference just by looking. It's slightly larger in scale, and they're slightly taller in scale too. Meaning, I'll show you the second one, which looks like this. And I know they look the same, probably, but trust me, this one's, the scale is smaller and it's more boxy. It's not as elongated, tall-wise. So this here is going to be your typical stamp that's used in sort of, I think 75 or 80% of all the JAJ Pyrex will have this stamp on it. Because now we've reached the period of time when the biggest amount of production is going on, and they carried through this stamp right up into the mid-1970s until James A. Jobling sold their shares to Corningware. So those are your typical stamps. But I do have this really interesting one I want to show first before I move on, which is this is your, I know it's a little blurry, but this is your typical JAJ stamping, but it has an addition of this little flame logo here at the bottom, which I find is very funny. It looks like a flower, but I think it's a flame, and I found it on a 2-pint lid, standard casserole lid, and out of all the hundreds of lids that I've seen and looked at throughout the years, I've never seen another one, so I just find it a real anomaly. If anyone knows anything about that, send it to me. It probably has to do with the fire resistance or the heat resistanceness of the dish or something like that. So just thought that was an oddity I wanted to show. Another oddity before I move on is a one-off thing, and here's the dish here. This is called wheat sheaf, and its stamping is like that there. It has the crown at the top, and then at the divider line it says Made in England below it. That's the only dish that's like that out of all of them. All the other oval casseroles, none of them have that. They're all just your regular JAJ stamp. Anyway, now we've come to the mid-1970s. JAJ have now sold their shares to Corning, but Corning carry on the white glass production. So, I left these two here. Sorry about this, but these I put to show the examples of the two different styles, the larger, elongated style of your JAJ marking, and then the smaller one here. And you can see they're two different milk jugs, but this is the earlier shaped milk jug and the later shaped milk jug. So it shows as the shapes change, the stamp changed as well in these cases. So back to this. The white glass is still carried on, typified by this Chelsea butter dish, so you got still got the nice clear white glass that we collect, but this one says made in England on it. So now Corningware bought the company, but they've carried on the white glass production for another couple years until eventually they move on. Another version of that, which I have here, it's the same Pyrex England. You'll notice I put this up because it has all the little markings from the factory and stuff on them. And someday I'll go through and find out what all the little dots mean. Lots of the lids and dishes have these kind of little numbers and dots and things on them. Nobody knows what they mean, apart from the people who made them. So, but anyway, the glass changes now. They change from the kind of white glass that we collect into this more opaque kind of white glass that I talk about all the time, that Corningware went to for a few years. Now, I do have a few pieces of it. They're marked, the first ones are all marked Pyrex England like that for a few years, right up into the 1980s. And here's another one here. This one's from the 1980s, and they also changed the logo to this, which you'll start to recognize the modern Pyrex logo that we see now, which looks like this. And you'll find this on all your modern Pyrex today, such as this, our day-to-day measure and jug. It has a Pyrex on. A lot of times now they're painted on instead of being embossed in the glass itself. So anyway, a quick run over of all the different patterns or the logos used throughout the years for Pyrex. Hope you found it interesting. Thanks.